Do you think they give terrorists a 6-month sentence or 20-year sentence or a life sentence? And that's assuming that they don't go full Israel and start killing the terrorists. Because once somebody's a terrorist, you can do anything you want to them. So I hope to God it doesn't actually happen. But right now, that think tank says that they are going to do that.
So both Politico and the New York Times are now reporting that Donald Trump is unlikely to implement Project 2025 as the blueprint for his second term, for his administration. And he is instead opting to work with a completely different right-wing think tank called the America First Policy Institute. Now, the Heritage Foundation penned the 900 pages of that policy book for Project 2025. They penned it before Trump was even the nominee for the Republican Party. And all of the reporting around that I had debunked, but people didn't believe me. Now that the election's over, it looks like the media is willing to admit, yeah, it looks like Trump's not gonna do Project 2025. But what he is willing to do is potentially implement some of the policies that have been recommended by the America First Policy Institute. So first, a little bit about this think tank, and they were smart. They were very hush-hush during the election, whereas the Heritage Foundation, while they were jockeying or competing for influence over Donald Trump, were a lot more public, and that drew the ire of reporters and Democrats. Now, this think tank, America First Policy Institute, was actually founded soon after Donald Trump lost the 2020 presidential race. The AFPI was born by Brooke Rollins, who's the Institute's chief executive and longtime Trump friend, Linda McMahon, who approached a Texas billionaire by the name of Tim Dunn about creating a national organization that could lay the groundwork for a second Trump administration. So that's when they launched this America First Policy Institute in 2021. McMahon, who led the Small Business Administration under Trump, has been charged with the policy matters for this think tank. And the co-chair is Howard Lutnick, who is the chief executive of Cantor Fitzgerald. He's preparing to hire thousands of people to run government agencies under Trump's watch. Now, in 2022, it brought in $23.6 million in revenue, according to a recent tax filing, and paid a number of former Trump administration officials hundreds of thousands of dollars in compensation. And they do, in fact, have some big plans. So Rollins has said that the think tank has already drafted nearly 300 executive orders ready for Trump's signature should he win the election. And he won the election. And yeah, these executive actions mainly seek to undo Biden's legacy, which I totally believe. I mean, that was one of the things that Trump did first when he was elected in 2016. He undid some of Obama's legacy. He pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. That's just one example. He undid some of Obama's environmental regulation. So I have no doubt that Trump would have interest in doing some of this stuff. And lobbyists have taken note and are directing their clients to meet with AFPI or suggesting policy. The think tank has an emphasis on deregulating the federal government and limiting its reach. Just a few more details about what they intend to implement policy-wise, or at least push for Trump to implement policy-wise. The Institute's policy book, titled The America First Agenda, is slimmer than the much debated plans espoused in Project 2025's 900-page mandate for leadership. Absent are attention-grabbing proposals such as banning pornography, prohibiting the mailing of abortion pills, or ending the Justice Department's status as an independent agency. So that's good. But there are some bad things in here, obviously. It calls for halting federal funding for Planned Parenthood and for mandatory ultrasounds before abortions, including those carried out with medication. It seeks to make concealed weapons permits reciprocal in all 50 states, increase petroleum production, which Trump talks about all the time, remove the United States from the Paris Agreement, impose work requirements on Medicaid recipients, and establish legally only 2 genders. It actually does go further than Project 2025 in some areas. So it goes significantly further than Project 2025 in one key area, calling for the elimination of nearly all civil service protections for federal workers by making them at-will employees, a strategy supporters believe will allow Trump and his aides to root out career staff members who they believe stood in the way in his first administration. And so this change would allow for the firing of civil servants for almost any reason. And agencies should be able to remove employees for any non-discriminatory reason with no external appeals, according to the Institute's policy book. So I totally believe this reporting. I think this is actually accurate reporting. And if reporters didn't just serve as stenographers for the Democratic Party, they would have maybe found out that there's a different think tank that literally has the same slogan as Donald Trump, and they might have reported on that ahead of time instead, but they didn't. Go ahead,
And
Cenk.
his top staffers were connected to it, including Kellyanne Conway, et cetera. So these guys are definitely in charge. And one of the Trump staffers on his campaign team said, they're not the transition team, but they kind of are. They said, he said, in effect they are. They've got, because we didn't have time to plan it. And here's a hilarious part of the story, before I get to the worst part of the story. They said Trump is superstitious, so he didn't want to talk about a transition team at all before he won, which then greatly delays them. I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of funny. Like, you got to do preparations whether you're superstitious or not. That's not measuring the drapes, right? Which I think Hillary Clinton almost literally did. Her team was like talking about furniture in the White House. Oh, that's so embarrassing. All right, anyway, so now here comes the worst part. So Project 2025 had those terrible parts where you could use the Justice Department to go after your enemies, et cetera. We were worried about it. Thank God that's not in there. But already the things that Anna read you are disastrous. We're gonna go backwards on climate change. We're gonna end funding for Planned Parenthood. But what did you think was gonna happen under a Trump term, right? So these are things that, by the way, almost all Republicans want. So Republican politicians. So that's what you were gonna get with Republicans. But wait, they add more. Politico says it has also expressed support for declaring Antifa a domestic terrorist group and making Trump's tax cut legislation permanent. So the corporate tax cuts are going to be monstrous. I was debating Representative Dan Crenshaw on Piers Morgan last night or yesterday, and he said, oh, forget lowering corporate taxes. We want to try to take away all corporate taxes. That means you, the regular average American, has to pay way more in taxes to make up for the fact that corporations won't be paying them anymore. This is a highway robbery, but that pales to, in terms of our freedoms as Americans. First of all, to the first thing I read you, Antifa doesn't even exist anymore. I don't know if it ever existed. I guess some dudes called themselves Antifa at one point, but have you heard of Antifa in the last couple of years? Nothing. There's no protest, no nothing. You know why? The guys whoever they were that went to a couple of protests, just so typical of the left wing, decided that there should be no organizational structure. So you know what happens when there's no organizational structure? There's no organization. And so they just kind of melted into the woods, right? And it was the most overhyped thing in the world to begin with. But that's not the important part, guys. When they say Antifa is a domestic terrorist group, they're just gonna call everyone Antifa that protests them. So now Israel's plan of calling all of their enemies terrorists has come to America. And so under Trump, if this is right, and Politico is reporting it about this group that is going to be in charge, people who protest Donald Trump might be called terrorists. And you know what they do to terrorists. So buckle up, brace for impact.
What do they do to terrorists? Like, I want to know what you think is gonna happen to protesters.
Oh, if they call them terrorists, you think they're not going to arrest them?
Oh, they might arrest them, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so first of all, the guys who didn't believe in cancel culture and believed in freedom say if you protest us, forget canceling your well-paid gig at a college university. We're gonna put you in jail, in prison. So do you think they give terrorists a 6-month sentence or 20-year sentence or a life sentence? And that's assuming that they don't go full Israel and start killing the terrorists. Because once somebody's a terrorist, you can do anything you want to them. So I hope to God it doesn't actually happen. But right now, that think tank says that they are going to do that.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.